Hey, hi and hello. Chris here. Thanks for stopping by. You know, it's bad enough when we have one serial killer, but when there are two working together, I can't even. I need to say that doing the research for this case was a little tough. There were so many variations to the story and so many little discrepancies. I tried my best to compile everything in the most accurate timeline and try to get the most accurate events. But if I missed something important or if I got a fact wrong, I really do apologize. Please let me know in the comment section below. If you like true crime stories and you haven't already, stick around and hit that little subscribe button. This case contains some disturbing video and discussion. Viewer discretion is highly advised. We are in San Francisco. It's June 2nd, 1985. It was just a routine shoplifting call, so the officer thought. But what South San Francisco police were about to uncover would shock and horrify everyone. So the police were called to South City Lumber Yard because one of the clerks witnessed an Asian man stealing a $75 vice grip. When the officer arrived, he pulled up to a 1980 Honda Prelude, and he was met by the sales clerk and a large bearded man. The clerk told the officer that he had seen the Asian man put the vice in the Honda's trunk before actually taking off. Now, the bearded man, he tried to explain that it was not intentional. He apologized. He even tried to pay for the vice. But the officer, well, you know, he really wasn't buying that. And looking into the trunk of the car, he noticed another bag. And upon further inspection, found a .22 revolver with a silencer attached. So very suspicious, the officer decided to run the registration on the car. Well, the car came back registered to the name Lonnie Bond, and the plate actually belonged to a Buick. After telling the bearded man that swapping plates was an actual crime, he asked for his ID. The ID that the bearded man had given him had the name of Robin Stapley. Well, now the officer was even more suspicious because it was clear that the bearded man that was in front of him did not match the picture or the age on the driver's license. The officer also checked the serial number on the gun, and it also came back to Robin Stapley. With the illegal silencer on the weapon and, of course, all the other things not adding up, the officer handcuffed the bearded man, read him his rights, and placed him under arrest. Now, down at the station, not only did the police find travel receipts in the name of Charles Gunner, the Honda's VIN number had actually come back, and it belonged to a man named Paul Cosner. Now, Paul Cosner had been reported missing 9 months earlier. In the interrogation room, the officer started questioning the bearded man about all these various names that keep coming up. The bearded man went pale, asked for a pen and paper, and also for a glass of water. He stated he wanted to write a note to his wife. So sweet. After writing a very short note, he took a drink of water and said that his name was Leonard Lake and his friend was Charles Ng. Within minutes, his eyes rolled back into his head and he was on the floor in convulsions. Now, the paramedics took Lake to the hospital. He was in a coma, and then 4 days later, he had died. So evidently, he had 2 cyanide capsules that were hidden in his shirt lapel, and he had actually swallowed them while he was in the interrogation room. And you are probably wondering, why would someone kill themselves over such what they seem small crimes? Well, like I said earlier, this whole case over a stolen vice would reveal something so disgusting and so horrific. You see, it didn't take police long to realize that they had something a lot bigger here. They had actually towed the Honda back to the station, and when it was searched, they found bloodstains, bullet holes, and they found shell casings. Detectives found several other items that included credit cards, documents. They had the names of Robin Stapley on them and Randy Jacobson. Robin Stapley had been reported missing since the previous April. A key piece of the puzzle was an electric bill. It had the name of Clara Lynn Balaz, and I apologize if I got that last name wrong, but that electric bill was found in the car. It turns out Balaz was Lake's ex-wife, and after talking to the ex-wife, the detectives learned about a cabin that was actually located in the Calvert County, just outside California. It was a remote cabin, and unless you were actually familiar with the area, you would never be able to find it. Balaz agreed to take the detectives to the cabin. At the cabin, the detectives noticed immediately that there was reddish-colored stains on the ceiling. There were several bullet holes in the kitchen, and they even found a bullet hole on the floorboard. They discovered a drawer full of women's lingerie and a blood-soaked mattress. They also found video equipment in the cabin, and after calling in the serial numbers into dispatch, the detectives learned it belonged to a Harvey Dubs. See, Harvey Dubs, his wife and baby boy had disappeared in July of 1984. After this initial inspection, the police obviously had enough to obtain a search warrant for the property. The priority for the search would be an actual incinerator that was found on the property. It had very thick fireproof walls, and because there were so many people missing that were actually linked to Lake and Ing, they wanted this done first. There was also a bunker on the property, but unfortunately, the search warrant did not cover this. Balaz, the ex-wife, was questioned in regards to Ing, and the officers also asked her for permission to search the bunker, which she kept refusing. While talking to Balaz, the detectives did learn that Lake and Ing were always together. And in fact, the previous day she had taken Ing to the airport, but he did not tell her where he was going. Balaz had informed the detectives that she had actually met Lake at a Renaissance fair. They dated briefly and then got married. Lake's best man at the wedding was a man by the name of Charles Gunner, and it is said that Gunner had paid for the entire wedding. Not long after the wedding, Ing moved in with Lake and his wife. During this conversation, Balaz stated that it wasn't long after Ing moved in, about 5 months, that the two men were seen moving crates from a truck into a shed. Well, guess what? The very next day after they were moving these crates, the FBI SWAT team raided the property and arrested Ing and Lake for the theft of weapons from a military base. Crazy. Lake was released on a $30,000 bail, which, by the way, Gunner, the best man at his wedding, had funded, and Ing was sentenced to 2 years in Leavenworth Prison. So now, while he's out on bail, Lake was making plans to run off and hide out in this cabin to avoid a prison sentence. He wanted Balaz to go with him, but she had refused, and the relationship was basically over. So after the detectives questioned Balaz a little bit at the cabin, they were able to finally receive an additional search warrant for that bunker. And yeah, the investigation began. One thing to note, while they were setting up and getting the teams ready for all this investigation, the detectives learned that the owner of the house next door, it was a rented property, and the owner of the house had rented it to a Lonnie Bond and a Brenda O'Connor. And they had a little baby boy named Lonnie Jr. It was stated that when the family didn't pay their rent, a real estate agent showed up to, try to collect the rent. And a man named Gunner had said that the family had moved out 10 days earlier. Yeah, sure they did. After calling the locksmith, the bunker on the property was finally opened. Looking around, they noticed so many tools and power saws. But what was disturbing about this was the fact that it looked like there was dried blood on all these items. Inside the bunker, they found a hidden room. It was actually behind a tool rack, and inside this tiny room, there was a double bed, there was a side table, a reading lamp, and several books. Hanging on a wall, there was a plaque with Operation Miranda engraved on it. And it was later learned that Operation Miranda came from a book called The Collector, where a butterfly collector had kidnapped a woman and keeps her locked in a cellar. So during the time the bunker is being searched and analyzed, the search outside of the property was still going on. And it certainly was going on. They had just discovered human bones by the driveway. On the second day of investigations, the team found a diary in the springs of a mattress. And it was later proven that it was indeed Lake that had written all these journal entries. And of course, because committing the crimes is just not enough, but we better document them as well. In this diary, Lake talks in horrific detail about how he and Ing had found, raped, and murdered several victims. And it also goes on to say that both Lake and Ing, they considered themselves survivalists. They were afraid of a nuclear war happening, and they were planning on building multiple bunkers and load these bunkers with weapons, supplies, and female sex slaves. That was the Operation Miranda. And it was his idea to use these females to repopulate the world. I mean, what a guy. Inside the bunker, the team had actually found another hidden room, but this room was very small. It was only 3 feet wide and 7.5 feet long. The only things in this room was a very narrow bed, a water container, and a chemical toilet. Between the two rooms, they found a two-way mirror, and it even had a little button that when pressed, you could hear inside of this tiny little room. I can't even imagine what was happening in that room. And one or other people were actually watching. It's just so sickening. This small shoplifting case turned into a major murder investigation. The FBI was called in. Heavy equipment was brought to the site, and the digging and the sorting began. On the third morning, Lake's mother actually showed up on the property, and she had expressed concern to the detectives that Donald, her other son and Lake's brother, had actually gone missing 2 years earlier, and she had no idea where he was. So many missing people. And now, we haven't forgotten about Ing. Now, while all this was happening on the property, there was still an ongoing search for him. The FBI did check his background and learned that he was originally from Hong Kong, came from a pretty wealthy family, and had sisters living in Canada. So they contacted Interpol and put out Ing's description worldwide, because he could have gone anywhere. 4 days at the scene, and the analysts were finding multiple items around the property that would be put into evidence. There was credit cards, wallets, documents. I mean, you name it. There was so much evidence being collected. But it was on the 5th day when the first bodies were found. There were skeletal remains of 2 bodies that were cut up and burned. Videotapes were amongst the hundreds of items going into evidence. When the detectives viewed these tapes, it showed unthinkable and very disturbing things that were happening on the property. On one video, it actually showed Lake discussing his plans about kidnapping and enslaving a woman.
Good evening. It's a Sunday in October, 22nd, 23rd, something like that. Very close to my 38th birthday. And I'm starting this tape without script or without any real organization of what I want to say. But I do feel I need to explain. This tape, what you're hearing now, is going to be the lead-in of the various phases of construction of a building, which hopefully will be the first of a series of underground buildings. The building will be multi-purpose. It'll serve as a tool room and a storage room for a lot of valuables and miscellaneous stuff that are useful to have, but not particularly items of immediate use that should be in the house. But the main emphasis of the building, the whole justification for its expense and its effort, will be a hidden portion of it, a secret room, if we can call it that, that will house a cell. This is the word that I've used in my discussions of this subject. A jail cell, if you will. And the purpose of that cell, and the main purpose, hence, of the building, will be the imprisonment of a young lady who probably at this moment is unknown to me. And nothing more. Well, actually I shouldn't say nothing more. The building, even the cell, will be multi-purpose. These are very trying times. There are wars and rumors of wars going on. Today 135 Marines were killed in Leonard. So having secret rooms, underground rooms, protected by concrete and steel and buried by 4 feet of earth, these are fairly safe investments, and the room and the building and the whole ultimate series of buildings will be designed not around the cell, but ultimately around the concept of a secret, secure living place for myself and perhaps for friends. But this first phase, it would be a lie to say it was anything other than primarily emphasizing the cell. History may be bored. Posterity may care less about this tape, care less about what I have to say. To be honest, I'm not too sure who I want to show this tape to, or if I will ever show it to anyone. But for anyone that is interested, anyone who needs my justifications or my rationalizations as to why I would want to imprison and in fact enslave a young woman, they have only to look closely at me. I'm a realist. I'm 38 years old, a bit chubby, not much hair, and losing what I have. Not particularly attracted to women or I should say, particularly attracting to women. And all of the traditional magnets, the money, the position / power, I don't have. And yet, I'm still very sexually active, and I'm still very much attracted to a particular type of woman who, almost by definition, is totally uninterested in me. Dirty old man, pervert. I'm attracted to young women. Sometimes even as young as 12. Although, to be fair, certainly 18 to 22 is a pretty much ideal range as far as my interests go. I like very slim women, very pretty, of course, petite, small-breasted, long hair, if I'm allowed, and such a woman, by virtue of her youth, her attractiveness, her desirability to certainly the majority of mankind, simply has options. There's no particular reason why such a woman should be interested in me. But there's more to it than that. It's difficult to explain my personality in 25 words or less, but I am in fact a loner. I enjoy the peace, the quiet, the solitude. I enjoy being by myself. And while my relationships with women in the past have been sexually successful, socially they've almost always been a failure. I've gone through 2 divorces, innumerable women, 50, 55, I forget exactly the count, I counted recently, but I'm afraid a bottom line statement is the simple fact that I'm a sexist slob. I enjoy using women, and of course women aren't particularly interested in being used. I certainly enjoy sex, I certainly enjoy the dominance of climbing on a woman and using her body. But I'm not particularly interested in the id, the ego, all the things that a man should be interested in to complement a woman's need. Now I can fake these emotions, and I can fake them very well. And in the past I've been very successful with attracting fairly interesting and attractive women simply because I did fake fairly well an interest in their needs and their requirements. So momentarily I had what I wanted and they thought they had what they wanted. But in the long term, I don't want to bother. What I want is an off-the-shelf sex partner. I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want. And when I'm tired or satiated or bored or not interested, I simply want to put her away, lock her up in a little room, get her out of my sight, out of my life, and thus avoid what heretofore has always been the obligation to entertain or amuse or satisfy a particular woman or girlfriend's whims of emotional whatevers. Such an arrangement, of course, is not only blatantly sexist, but highly illegal, there's no doubt about it. It violates all of the human rights and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to spare posterity my concepts of other people's morality. I'm explaining my morality, what I feel, what I want. And as of this moment, I'm going to try to get it. The advantages of such a situation are, of course, obvious, and even beyond sexual. Such a woman, totally enslaved, would be useful for the mundane chores that I have to do, but I'm not particularly interested in doing. Clean house, washing dishes, etc. Slave, there's no way around it. Primarily a sexual slave, but nonetheless a physical slave as well. And I believe that if I can construct a holding cell, a place where I can put such a woman, where I can walk off and feel secure that she can't escape, that I can create a facility that is so stark and so empty, so cold, so quiet, so totally removed from the world, that fairly quickly, by a combination of painful punishments when I'm displeased and minor rewards such as music or magazines or some such stuff, that I can quickly condition, this is my belief, that I can quickly condition a young woman to cooperate with me fully, and in fact even look forward to cooperating with me fully, simply if for no other reason than such cooperation would be a relief from boredom. Whether I can do this or not will remain to be seen. Obviously, I've never done such a thing before, and it may not work. However, I want to try. I want to try. The cost of this enterprise is going to be immense. We're talking about $5,000, thousands of dollars for foundations, $2,000 for bricks, hundreds of dollars for, power equipment to dig the earth out, many, many costs. Still, life as I'm living it is boring. The challenge of this project, the excitement, the thrill if it succeeds, even the exciting experience if it fails, as long as I don't get caught. It's very attractive. It's something that I fantasize daily about. We'll see. I don't think there's more to say on the subject. This hopefully will be a history. Starting tomorrow, I start clearing the land. I've hired a man with a chainsaw to come over and cut some trees. And tomorrow evening a backhoe will arrive, and I'll start excavating the earth. It'll be interesting to see how far this tape can I actually go.
In another video, it showed a young lady chained to a chair and then later performing a striptease for the two men. Ing could be seen in the video on the bed while Lake was actually taking pictures. The young woman was later identified as 18-year-old Kathy Allen. This video also contained footage of Brenda O'Connor. Remember the next door neighbor that we had talked about earlier? And she was begging the men for information about her baby. And it shows Brenda, after being threatened and taunted numerous times, finally breaking down and agreeing to cooperate with the two men. A typed note was also found, and it was the rules that these women were to follow. I must be ready to service my master. I must be clean, brushed, and made up with my cell neat. I must never speak unless spoken to. Unless in bed, I must never look at my master in the eye, but must keep my eyes downcast. I must never show my disrespect, either verbally or silent. I must never cross my arms or legs in front of my body, or clench my fists, and unless eating, must always keep my lips sealed. I must be obedient completely and in all things. I must obey without question or comment. I must always be quiet when locked in my cell. I must remember and obey any additional rules told to me. I must understand that disobedience, any pain, trouble, or annoyance caused by me to my master will be grounds for punishment. I can't even imagine what these poor women had to endure when they were being held up in that cabin. It's heartbreaking and so horrific. As the search of the property progressed, they found approximately 45 pounds of bone fragments and, sadly, more bodies. And it was estimated that there were at least 25 people that had been murdered, cut up, burnt, and spread around the property. It is speculated that the women were victimized, tortured, raped, while any of the men that were caught up in all this were killed immediately. The known victims would later be identified as Kathleen Allen and her boyfriend Michael Carroll, Robin Stapley, Randy Johnson, Charles Gunner, Lake's best man, Donald Lake, Lake's brother, Paul Cosner, the owner of the Honda, Brenda O'Connell, Lonnie Bond, and their son Lonnie Jr. They were the neighbors. Harvey Dubbs, his wife Deborah, and their son Sean. Those were the owners of the video equipment. And at this point, you're probably wondering, who the heck are these two men, and what is the story? Well, I don't want to emphasize too much on them, but I will tell you some of the stuff that the FBI dug up while the investigation was going on. Leonard Lake was born October 29th in 1945 in San Francisco, California. His parents, obviously not getting along, decided to divorce when Lake was just 6 years old. He and his siblings were sent to live with his grandparents. And I don't know how true this is, but according to several documents, it is stated that Lake had an unnatural obsession with porn and even had his sisters partake in nude photos and sexual activities. And what is more disturbing, I mean, that's really disturbing, but what is even more disturbing is the fact that it is also stated that the grandmother knew about this, and not only did she not do anything about it, she seemed to have actually encouraged it. At 19, Lake enlisted in the Marines and had done a couple tours in Vietnam. He had served 7 years and then was discharged for medical reasons. After his release, he was treated for psychological problems. Clearly not treated enough. And that was in 1981 when he met, Clara Lynn Blaz and moved to a commune of all places. And according to sources, it was about this time that Lake became obsessed with the survivalist lifestyle, and he started stocking weapons and supplies. Charlie Ng was born in Hong Kong on December 24th, 1961. And he actually grew up in a very affluent family, but had a rebellious streak. He was always being expelled from various schools. At 18 years old, Ng obtained a student visa to study in the U.S., but clearly school was not for him and he ended up dropping out. After a few minor incidents with the law, Ng enlisted in the Marines. I know, he wasn't a U.S. citizen, but it was later discovered that he lied on his enrollment paperwork. So because Ng is a little thief, he ended up actually stealing a bunch of military weapons and was locked up. He ended up escaping, which is, some sources say that he escaped, some say that he had actually served time, so I could actually not find the actual information, but he did make his way to California, whether he escaped or had done his time, and that's where he met up with Lake, and that's where this all began. So now the FBI eventually traced Ng's movements back to, of all places, my home where I am now, Calgary, Canada. Yeah, of all places, right? And you wouldn't believe what got him caught. Well, you can probably believe. Yeah, it was shoplifting. The guy just could not stop and leave well enough alone. But I guess in hindsight, that's a good thing, because he was caught. So he was caught shoplifting some items from a department store called the Hudson Bay. When security approached him, he drew a gun and threatened them. Scuffle broke out, and one of the officers was shot in the hand. He's okay. He wasn't seriously injured. But Ng was eventually taken down and put into custody. He was charged in Canada with attempted robbery, possession of a firearm, and attempted murder. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details because there is a lot, but because of Canadian laws, it took almost 6 years for Ng to be extradited back to the United States. When he finally got back to the United States, what I can tell you is that the trial in the United States at the time, back in the day, this would be one of the most costly criminal trials in U.S. history. I don't know if it still is, but at the time, it was one of the most costly U.S. criminal trials. Why? Because Ng used everything he had, from firing lawyers, requests to move trials, you name it, everything to postpone and appeal this trial. After 13 years, yes, 13 years, the trial of Charles Ng began. Now, a lot of evidence and a lot of testimony took place. It was an 8-month trial, and the verdict was finally in. Charles Ng was found guilty on 11 charges of murder and was sentenced to death by lethal injection. As of today, Ng sits on death row in San Quentin prison. No execution date has been set, and it's probably because there has been no executions in the state of California since 2006. And I can't even imagine how long those two would have gotten away with this sadistic behavior if it wasn't for Ng's shoplifting problem. It was the shoplifting that was the only thing that got these guys caught. It's crazy to think, right? But that's it for today's case. What did you guys think? Comment down below. I always love hearing your opinions. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the little thumbs up button as you head out. It is always appreciated. I hope you guys are doing well and staying safe. Until next time, lots of love from Calgary.